On a seemingly ordinary day in 1971, just minutes after an American airline flight took off, a passenger seated in the back called a flight attendant over and handed her a small envelope with a polite yet unsettling smile. Curious but unsuspecting, the flight attendant accepted the envelope and opened it. What she saw inside made her heart race. The note contained only a few words, yet those words sent shockwaves throughout the United States. Who was this mysterious passenger, and why has the FBI, one of the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world, been unable to track him down, dead or alive, for over 5 decades? This is not just a story. It is one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. Welcome back to True Crime Syndicate, where we delve deep into the most baffling criminal cases. Today, we unravel the fascinating case of one of the most infamous hijackings in aviation history, a crime so daring that it continues to perplex investigators to this day. The incident took place on November 24, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving, at Portland International Airport in Oregon. Amid the usual hustle and bustle of holiday travelers, a man who appeared to be an ordinary businessman arrived at the ticket counter. He was well-dressed, wearing a dark suit, a neatly pressed white shirt, and a black tie. With his hair combed to the side and dark sunglasses covering his eyes, he exuded an air of quiet confidence. He approached the counter and purchased a one-way ticket to Seattle, Washington, a short 45-minute journey aboard Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305. Back in 1971, airport security was nowhere near as strict as it is today. Passengers could walk straight onto their flights without metal detectors, baggage scans, or even identity verification. It was a different era, one that made what was about to happen all too easy. Carrying nothing but a briefcase, the man, who gave his name as Dan Cooper, walked towards the aircraft. He boarded the Boeing 727 without attracting any attention and chose a seat in the very last row of the cabin. From there, he had a clear view of the flight attendants and the rest of the passengers. Settling in, he ordered a drink, bourbon and soda, while waiting for the plane to take off. He casually lit a cigarette, blending in effortlessly with the other passengers. In the 1970s, smoking was still permitted on flights, and his behavior raised no suspicions. At exactly 2:58 p.m., the aircraft taxied down the runway and lifted into the sky. What seemed like a routine flight was about to turn into a nightmare. Moments after takeoff, Cooper leaned slightly toward one of the flight attendants, Florence Schaffner, and handed her a small envelope. At first, she assumed it was just another passenger trying to be flirtatious or leaving a phone number, as was common back then. But as soon as she unfolded the letter and read its contents, her blood ran cold. The message inside was short, but its implications were terrifying. The note read, "Miss, I have a bomb in my briefcase. I want you to sit beside me. This is a hijacking." Florence's breath hitched, and she stole a nervous glance at the man. His expression remained calm, his eyes hidden behind the dark sunglasses. She hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do, but then, as if sensing her hesitation, Cooper slowly opened his briefcase just enough for her to see inside. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. Inside the briefcase were several red cylindrical objects attached to wires and what appeared to be a detonator. Cooper wasn't bluffing. With her hands slightly trembling, Florence quickly took a seat beside him, as instructed. She knew she had no choice but to comply, and from that moment on, a tense game of cat and mouse between the hijacker and the authorities had begun. What did Cooper want? How did he manage to vanish without a trace? And why, after more than 50 years, has the FBI never been able to find him? Stay tuned as we uncover the incredible story of the most enigmatic hijacker in history, D.B. Cooper. "Miss, I have a bomb here, and I would like you to sit by me. I have a bomb, and I want you to sit next to me." When Florence Schaffner sat next to Dan Cooper, she opened her briefcase, which contained 8 dynamite sticks and a detonator. In short, the plane was hijacked, and Dan Cooper had a total of 3 demands. Before 5 o'clock, he needed a $200,000 cash, 2 pairs of parachutes, and a refueling truck ready at Seattle Airport. At the end of his demands, he indirectly told Florence Schaffner that if there was a mistake, I would tear the bomb. Apart from Dan Cooper, there were 35 passengers on board who had no idea about what was going on behind the scenes. Florence Schaffner took Dan Cooper's demands, went into the cockpit, and told the captain the whole story. Another air hostess, whose name was Tina McLeod, now took an intercom and sat next to Dan Cooper, who was working to send a message between the pilot and Dan Cooper. Remember that this was the first plane in American history to be hijacked, which was done for ransom. This is why local authorities and the FBI decided to meet all the demands of the hijacker. Obviously, the authorities also knew that Dan Cooper would not be able to run far from them. The flight, which was to land in Seattle in just 45 minutes, was now hovering around the airport for the next 1.5 hours, and the remaining 35 passengers, who were completely unaware of the whole incident, were told that the plane was having trouble landing due to technical difficulties. Meanwhile, $20,000 of $10,000 notes were collected from the Seattle National Bank, whose serial numbers were noted, and 2 pairs of parachutes were also arranged from a nearby skydiving club. The plane was landed at 5:45 p.m., and as promised, Dan Cooper was given a bag full of money and 2 pairs of parachutes. The plane was also refueled. After fulfilling his demands, Dan Cooper gave permission to 35 passengers and 2 flight crews to get off the plane, while the pilots and 2 flight crews were told to stay on board. It was nighttime, and the plane took off again. Dan Cooper sent some special instructions to the pilot through Tina McLeod, who was sitting next to him. He wanted the landing gears and flaps of the plane to remain open, the altitude to be 10,000 feet, the speed to be 320 kilometers per hour, and the plane to be taken straight to Mexico City. The pilot fulfilled all the other demands, but it was not possible to take the plane straight to Mexico City due to fuel. Therefore, the pilot gave Dan Cooper 2 options for refueling, Reno or Phoenix. Dan Cooper agreed to Reno. On the other hand, local and federal authorities were also doing their job. 2 fighter jets were sent behind the plane, but they were not able to maintain such a slow speed, so they started circling around the plane. In the dark of the night, the plane was heading towards Reno. Meanwhile, Dan Cooper told Tina McLeod to go to the cockpit, where 2 pilots and 1 flight attendant were present. When Tina turned to close the cockpit door, she only saw for the last time that Dan Cooper was tying something on his waist. After that, the stairs of the plane opened, and Dan Cooper jumped from there. Whatever happened after that has been discussed since the last 50 years. After 3 hours when the plane landed in Reno, the entire plane was checked thoroughly, but neither Cooper nor any bomb could be found in the plane. Not only in the plane, but after this incident, no trace of Dan Cooper could be found anywhere, neither alive nor dead. After all, who was Dan Cooper, and where did he go by deceiving the eyes of the whole of America? This case is the case of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which has not been closed so far. No one had seen Dan Cooper jumping from the plane, but because the staircase remained open, it was clear that he had jumped somewhere between Seattle and Reno. The FBI started looking for evidence on the plane, but unfortunately they found only Cooper's tie, 8 cigarette butts, and one of the 2 parachutes, which Cooper had left behind, so that no one had a picture of him. After interviewing the passengers and crew, a sketch of Dan Cooper was made according to his appearance. Before Dan Cooper was found between Seattle and Reno, the FBI had to know exactly where he had jumped from the plane. It was not very difficult to find out because the plane was on autopilot. That is, the path on which the plane was flying was already recorded. The speed and altitude of the plane were already known, and with the help of a flight recorder, it was found that the staircase of the plane was open at 8:10. Based on all this information, a search area was defined by estimating Dan Cooper's drop location. This area of 45 square kilometers is surrounded by dense forests and mountains. The aerial team and the land search team searched this entire area thoroughly, but neither did they find any sign of Cooper, nor did they find any briefcase or money. So it was so cold in this whole area that everyone thought that Dan Cooper must have died. But after that, whatever happened, it was not even in the imagination of the FBI. For the first time in American history, the FBI started seeking public help for this case. Dan Cooper's sketch and a $200,000 serial number were also published in newspapers, and any information about Dan Cooper was promised a reward. They thought that if Cooper was alive, he would definitely spend the money somewhere. But surprisingly, not a single note of that serial number was ever re-released anywhere. But the matter was not over yet. About 9 years later, that is, an incident occurred in 1980. There is a beach on the banks of the Columbia River in southern Washington, which is called Tena Bar. Here, a child was playing with his parents when he found three pieces of notes on the banks of the river. These were $20 bills, which amounted to a total of $5,800. The child's parents, realizing the significance of the money, immediately took it to the FBI. After careful examination, the authorities confirmed that the serial numbers on the bills matched the ones that Dan Cooper had taken during the hijacking. This discovery marked the first major breakthrough in the case after nearly a decade of fruitless searching. However, instead of providing clarity, this revelation only deepened the mystery. The money was found approximately 27 kilometers away from the suspected drop location. Initially, investigators speculated that the cash must have fallen from Cooper's possession while he was in the air, eventually making its way into the Lewis River. The assumption was that it drifted downstream and ended up in the Columbia River. But further analysis debunked this theory. It was soon discovered that the Columbia River actually flows in the opposite direction. This meant that there was no conceivable way for the money to have traveled naturally from the Lewis River to Tina Bar Beach, where it was found. The baffling inconsistency left the FBI with more questions than answers. Adding another layer of complexity to the case, it was revealed that Tina Bar Beach had undergone excavation work in 1974, 3 years after the hijacking. During this process, additional layers of sand were deposited along the shore. Strangely, the discovered money was buried within this newly added sand. This detail suggested a startling possibility. Dan Cooper or someone connected to him may have deliberately buried the money at the site years after the crime, possibly as a way to mislead investigators and create a diversion. This realization reignited interest in the case and led to renewed investigations. The FBI continued to interview individuals who matched Cooper's profile, but despite their efforts, they failed to uncover any definitive leads. Over time, numerous theories emerged. Some experts suggested that Dan Cooper had a military background. One of the strongest arguments for this theory was the type of parachute he selected. Among the equipment he took was a military-grade parachute, far more complex and difficult to maneuver than the civilian parachute he left behind in the aircraft. His ability to confidently choose and handle such specialized gear led many to believe he had advanced training, possibly from military service. By 1980, despite the discovery of approximately $5,800 in cash, the remaining $9,710 from the ransom was never recovered. The lack of additional evidence only compounded the enigma surrounding the case. To this day, the FBI has little more than a composite sketch of Cooper, the ticket he purchased using the alias Dan Cooper, and a black tie he left behind on the plane. Interestingly, forensic experts noted that the tie clip was positioned on the left side, suggesting that Cooper was left-handed. Even after more than 5 decades, this case continues to baffle investigators. The FBI has kept all available details public on their website, and the case file remains open, a testament to the agency's persistent, yet unfulfilled, quest for answers. If you found this case as fascinating as we do, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to True Crime Syndicate. Your engagement and thoughtful comments mean the world to us. Thank you for your continued support, and we'll see you in our next deep dive into the world of true crime.